After the Second World War, West Germany wanted to rearm. They wanted to show the world that they were no longer the country that had caused so much destruction. They wanted to be a part of the solution. And what better way to do that than with advanced technical innovations? The Germans were eager to join NATO, but they soon realized that their new allies had a big problem. How could they get troops and supplies to the front quickly? Well, the answer might have come in the form of an unlikely candidate, a giant flying wedge with 10 jet engines. Today we'll talk about the strange and unique Dornier Do-31, a flying wedge that could land on any flat surface. In the 1950s and 1960s, West Germany wanted not only to rearm, but also to contribute with advanced technical innovations. One of these goals was to develop military aircraft that could operate more flexibly, especially in areas without solid airfield infrastructure, which was a constant concern in the event of nuclear war or a loud conflict. VTOL, short for vertical takeoff and landing, was a concept that was making waves in military aviation at the time. The idea of an aircraft that could take off without a runway opened up the possibility of rapidly deploying forces anywhere, including areas under attack or in difficult terrain. While Britain was developing the Harrier, the world's first VTOL combat aircraft, West Germany was aiming for a more ambitious goal: to develop an entire VTOL ecosystem, including fighters and strategic transport aircraft. Tasked with realizing this ambition was Dornier, an aviation company with a long history dating back to the German Empire. Dornier had been famous for designing giant seaplanes during World War II, and now they were expected to make a breakthrough with the Dornier Do-31, the world's first VTOL transport aircraft ever built. The idea of the Do-31 was revolutionary, an aircraft that could carry cargo, troops, and military equipment without any traditional airport infrastructure. It would be capable of operating from makeshift airfields, highways, or even empty fields. In a conflict where runways could be destroyed at any moment, that capability was a huge tactical advantage. The Do-31 project was more than just developing an aircraft. It was a statement. West Germany could be creative, could innovate, and could play a central role in NATO's defense system. At first glance, the Dornier Do-31 is a strange aircraft in the truest sense. Unlike any other transport aircraft ever designed, the Do-31 is equipped with 10 jet engines, an extremely unusual number even in the modern era. 2 main engines are mounted on the wings, Rolls-Royce Pegasus, the same type used in the Harrier aircraft. Each wing is also equipped with a nacelle, a lift engine cluster consisting of 4 small jet engines. In total, each wing has 1 main engine and 4 lift engines, doubling the 2 sides to 10 engines. The goal of this design is to provide enough vertical thrust to lift the entire fuselage off the ground during takeoff, landing, then transition to level flight using the main engines like a conventional aircraft. In theory, combining multiple engines like this can help ensure the flexibility of the aircraft. However, in practice, this system is too complex to operate and maintain, especially in combat conditions. Each engine requires a separate fuel, control, and maintenance system. With 10 engines on an aircraft, the engineering workload is almost double that of a conventional transport. Synchronizing the lift engines to ensure even lift is a huge challenge. If one side lifts more than the other by just a few percent, the aircraft can tilt, flip, or lose control. In addition, a nacelle containing the lift engines also increases mass and aerodynamic drag, directly affecting performance and level flight. This made the Do-31 both heavy and fuel-hungry in both flight modes. The lift engines were designed to be used for only a few minutes during takeoff and landing, meaning that they spent most of the flight time idle but still carrying weight. This was one of the fatal weaknesses of the auxiliary-powered VTOL design. Unlike the Harrier, which used a single engine that could direct the thrust, the Do-31 carried up to 8 lift engines that served only one purpose. Every kilogram of weight from those engines was a burden for the rest of the flight. Much of the payload capacity was taken up by the weight of the engines and the aircraft's structure. With an empty weight of around 22 tons and a maximum takeoff weight of around 46 tons, with an empty weight of around 22 tons and a maximum takeoff weight of around 46 tons, with an empty weight of around 22 tons and a maximum takeoff weight of around 46 tons. Much of the payload capacity was taken up by the weight of the engines and the aircraft structure. The Do-31E1, a horizontal flight test version, first flew in 1967, and the E3, a fully VTOL version, first flew in 1969. Although the test flights were largely successful, it was clear early on that the aircraft was extremely difficult to fly in VTOL mode. Its actual operational capability, especially from a field landing site, was still questionable. Maintenance, operating, and fuel costs far exceeded initial estimates. During demonstration flights, the Do-31 made a splash among experts. But that was not enough to prove that it was a practical solution for the armed forces. By the end of the 1960s, the West German government had poured more than 100 million Deutschmarks into the project, a huge sum at the time. However, when compared to the actual benefits, more and more people were skeptical about whether this investment was worth it. In addition, NATO, initially a potential partner for the Do-31, began to change its military strategy, favoring conventional systems that were easier to maintain and less risky in combat. By the end of the 1960s, the West German government had poured more than 100 million Deutschmarks into the project, a huge sum at the time. However, when compared to the actual benefits, more and more people were skeptical about whether this investment was worth it. In addition, NATO, initially a potential partner for the Do-31, began to change its military strategy, favoring conventional systems that were easier to maintain and less risky in combat. The story of the Do-31 is not just about technological failure, but also about the limitations of innovation in a political context. Although it never entered series production, the Do-31 still holds the record as the world's only VTOL jet transport aircraft to have successfully flown. It was not a complete failure, because it opened up new avenues of research, aerodynamic testing, and flight techniques for the whole of Europe. Today, we tend to view technological failures through a very modern lens. A failure doesn't necessarily mean it's outdated. Sometimes it just means it was ahead of its time. The case of the Dornier Do-31 is a perfect example of this. It wasn't a bad design, but the technology was just a little bit ahead of its time. But perhaps the real lesson is not about technology, but about strategy. Although the Germans had the right idea with the Do-31, the execution was just a little bit off. The aircraft was too expensive to operate and maintain, and it didn't really solve any problems that couldn't be solved with more conventional aircraft. Ultimately, the Do-31 was a victim of its own ambition. It was trying to do too much and ended up failing to do anything. Nevertheless, the legacy of the Do-31 lives on in the hearts and minds of aviation enthusiasts around the world. It remains a symbol of the power of innovation and the importance of adapting to changing circumstances. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll see another VTOL transport aircraft taking off from any flat surface and bringing us closer together. In 1970, the Dornier Do-31 project was officially canceled. The two prototypes, E1 and E3, were placed in the Air Museum near Friedrichshafen, where the manufacturer's headquarters is located today. One is at the Dornier Museum near Friedrichshafen, the manufacturer's headquarters. The other is at the Deutsches Museum Flugwerft, Schleißheim, near Munich. The Dornier Do-31, although not as successful as expected, has left a valuable legacy in aviation history. What do you think about the Dornier Do-31? Did such a VTOL aircraft change the aviation industry today? Please like, share, and leave your comments in the comments section. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you for watching and see you in the next videos.